Airlines will lose your luggage, forget your vegan meal, and still have the audacity to slap you with attitude like you're flying for free. Welcome to the skies, where the peanuts are optional, but the microaggressions come complimentary. The California sun shimmered like polished gold across the sleek curves of a black Rolls-Royce Phantom as it glided to a stop at the private terminal of LAX. The kind of arrival that made assistants pause and executives look twice. Yet the woman who stepped out of the back seat moved with the calm of someone used to being underestimated. Zara Mendez, 32, skin the color of burnished bronze, a face both soft and unbothered. Her hair slicked into a low chignon, not a strand out of place. No flashy jewelry, no entourage, just a tailored camel coat over an ivory jumpsuit that whispered money, not screamed it. The chauffeur opened the door with deference. Zara offered a simple thank you, picked up a small Louis Vuitton carry-on, and walked toward the glass doors like she owned the air beneath her heels. Inside the private check-in lounge for Airline Airways, she passed silently through security. No one greeted her by name. No one offered a warm towel or champagne. She didn't correct them. She never did. As she approached the jet bridge, two flight attendants glanced up, barely masking their curiosity. A black woman, flying solo, boarding first class in silence, wearing wealth like second skin. They gave each other a look. Rapper's girlfriend? One whispered under her breath. Zara caught it. She smiled just slightly. It wasn't the first time. It wouldn't be the last. She stepped onto the aircraft, her Louboutin heels clicking with quiet confidence down the aisle toward the front cabin. First class was half full. She clocked the passengers in an instant. A tech exec in a Patagonia vest, a finance bro with Bluetooth earbuds, and an elderly white couple who stiffened when she passed. Her seat was 1A, window side. She stowed her carry-on, sank into the butter-soft leather, and pulled out a book. The Art of War, worn dog-eared. No iPad, no noise-canceling headphones. Just her and her silence. She barely noticed the pilot step into the cabin, until he stopped. He was tall, in his mid-50s, with the permanent scowl of someone who hated flying people more than flying planes. His uniform crisp, his eyes cold. Captain Rowan Nash, a veteran of the skies and an overinflated sense of authority. He looked at her like she was a glitch in a matrix. "You lost?" he asked, voice low but edged with disbelief. Zara looked up, calm, unbothered. "No, this is first class," he clarified. She held up her boarding pass between two manicured fingers. "1A," she said, voice smooth. "This is my seat." "Let me see that." She handed it to him. He examined it like it had been forged. Then again. "This can't be right." "It is," she replied. He handed it back sharply. "You need to move." This seat was reserved for a VIP. "I am a VIP," she said, not smiling. He scoffed, loud enough for the tech exec across the aisle to look up. The elderly couple stared out right now. "I don't know how you got this seat," the pilot said, "but unless you're willing to explain yourself properly, you're going to have to move. I'll have you removed." "I paid for my ticket," Zara replied, slow and clear. "I am not moving." He stepped closer, his face now inches from hers. "Don't play games with me. I've seen you type. Think a pretty face and a sugar daddy's credit card buys you the world. But this seat," he pointed a rigid finger at the headrest. "This seat is for someone who belongs here." Zara's eyes didn't flinch. "You're right," she said quietly. "It is." Rowan clenched his jaw. Something inside him snapped. Pride, control, maybe a lifetime of barely checked rage. And with one sudden, unforgivable motion, he slapped her. The sound echoed through the cabin. A hard, sharp crack against her cheek. The kind of sound that could silence a storm. Gasps exploded. A woman 3 rows back clutched her pearls. A man dropped his phone in shock. Someone shouted, "Yo, what the hell?" Zara didn't cry out. She just slowly turned her face back toward him, the redness blooming on her cheek like a brand. A younger passenger pulled out his phone, already recording. "Did he just? Oh my God, did you get that on camera?" Captain Nash straightened, as if he'd just adjusted his seatbelt. "This is what happens when people don't follow the rules," he muttered to no one. Zara sat still, composed, regal almost. Her voice came low, firm. I suggest you call your supervisor. The cabin was silent. But outside that plane, a storm had just begun brewing, and not even Captain Nash could fly around what was coming. The moment the slap echoed through the cabin, everything changed. But not for the people who should have been changing. Within 5 minutes, 2 flight attendants reappeared, tense, overcompensating politeness on their faces. One crouched beside Zara like she was a ticking bomb. "Ma'am," the brunette whispered, eyes darting nervously toward the cockpit. "We're going to need you to step off the aircraft." Zara blinked slowly. "Excuse me. You've been deemed uncooperative," the attendant said, her voice shaking. "Captain Nash has requested. He slapped me." "We understand," the second attendant chimed in quickly, forcing a smile. "This isn't a punishment. We're just trying to de-escalate the situation." Zara glanced around. Half the cabin was pretending not to stare. The other half wasn't even pretending. "Phones out. Cameras up," someone whispered. Zara stood, deliberately slow, her presence towering even in silence. She collected her coat, straightened her blouse. She turned to the passengers. "Just once. Record everything. You're going to want proof." And then she walked, calmly, powerfully, off the plane with 2 airline staff trailing behind her like nervous interns. No apology. No manager. No accountability. The doors closed behind her with a thunk. Seconds later, Flight 807 to New York began taxiing to the runway. Zara stood in the glass-walled terminal, watching the plane disappear into the sun. Her cheek still throbbed, but she didn't touch it. Meanwhile, at Airline Airways' corporate legal department, the storm had already landed. It started with a ping on Slack. "Anyone seeing this video?" Then a second. "Pilot hits black woman in first class." It's going viral. 10 minutes later, legal, PR, and crisis comms were in a frenzy. Screens lit up with grainy footage from 6 different angles. Passengers had already uploaded clips to Reddit, TikTok, Twitter, and 3 Facebook mom groups. They tried flagging the videos for removal. They even reached out to a media contact and news station to hold the story until facts were clear. But facts? The footage was the fact, and the optics were nuclear. A white male pilot slapping a black female passenger in first class? It didn't take a media consultant to know how that would look. Back in the terminal, Zara stepped into the airport's luxury lounge. Not because she needed to calm down, but because she needed a quiet place to do what came next. She didn't post online. She didn't scream, call TMZ, or tweet at the airline. Instead, she opened her phone, tapped open a hidden contact, typed 3 words. "It's time. Boardroom." She stared at the message for a moment before pressing send. Her hand didn't even tremble, because this moment, it had always been coming. Flashback. 15 years earlier, Zara, then 17, stood in the corner of a hangar at a private airport in Nevada, wiping down the wing of a Gulfstream G650. Her hands were blistered. Her uniform 2 sizes too big. But her eyes burned with something electric. She didn't just clean jets. She studied them. Watched the suits and tailored blazers walk past her like she didn't exist. Listened to their calls. Memorized names. Traced tail numbers. She knew who was rich, who was faking, who owned the planes, and who was paying them off in crypto or quiet debt. And then one day, someone noticed her. An old man with silver hair and a $40,000 watch caught her scribbling numbers from a fuel invoice in her notebook. He didn't report her. He asked her one question. "You know what margin pressure is, kid?" That man, Mr. Kingsley Darnell, the reclusive owner of a software company that specialized in aviation telemetry, would become the only real mentor Zara ever had. He taught her the difference between revenue and real money, showed her how private aviation ran on bleeding-edge patents and licensing loopholes, and gave her a 2% stake in a tech patent she helped him clean up, ZBX, a fuel optimization software. By the time she turned 24, Zara sold her share in that patent for $3.4 million. By 26, she'd flipped it into $40 million through smart, aggressive investing in airport logistics and distressed airlines during a market crash. And by 30, she used blind trusts, dummy corporations, and private bidding firms to quietly acquire 30% of Airline Airways, the very airline she'd once cleaned toilets for. $200 million. No seat on the board. No photo ops. No one even knew her name. Until today, as she sat alone in the lounge, sipping a glass of water, Zara's phone buzzed again. Reply. Understood. Full board in 72 hours. She smiled. The pilot had thought she was just another woman flying too close to privilege. But what he didn't know was, she wasn't on his plane. She owned it. The conference room on the 42nd floor of Airline Airways headquarters in Manhattan buzzed with restrained chaos. Leather chairs screeched against polished marble floors. Armani jackets flung over chair backs. A half-eaten tray of pastries sat untouched. Someone had ordered coffee for 12. No one touched it. The boardroom smelled like nerves. At the head of the table sat Marshall Kavanaugh, CEO. Late 50s, stocky, Harvard ring flashing on his hand as he rubbed his temple. To his right, Leon Bloom, head of corporate PR, scrolled anxiously through Twitter. On his left, Jonas Kwan, general counsel, tapped his Mont Blanc against the glass table. The topic wasn't up for debate anymore. It was about survival. She was aggressive, Leanne said, scrolling faster. There's still time to shift the narrative. She wasn't aggressive, Jonas said flatly. She was seated, calm, and assaulted on a plane. Rowan's been with us 22 years. Another board member chimed in, waving his hand like that mattered more than facts. He's got thousands of hours logged, trained 2/3 of our junior pilots. He's respected. By who? Jonas countered. Marshall exhaled. We've survived worse. This doesn't need to become a class action circus. Leon nodded eagerly. We release a vague statement. Say we're investigating. Quietly put him on leave. And the woman? Asked Jonas, eyes narrowing. We claim she refused to show ID, was verbally combative, said another voice from the back. She doesn't even have a lawyer, someone added. If she wanted to sue, she'd have done it already. They all nodded, as if logic were on their side. But just as Marshall opened his mouth to delegate next steps, the door opened, and Zara walked in. Not stormed. Walked. Graceful. Composed. Wearing the same outfit from the flight, the ivory jumpsuit, the camel coat draped effortlessly over her shoulders. No makeup touch-up. No entourage. Just a manila folder in one hand, and a stillness in her gaze that made the room instantly drop 10 degrees. Marshall stood halfway from his seat. I'm sorry, this meeting is closed. It's not, Zara said. Calm. Absolute. Not anymore. She walked slowly to the center of the table, her heels clicking like a metronome of judgment. No one dared speak. Before you finish building the lie you're going to feed the press, she said, you should know, your biggest problem isn't bad optics. She dropped the folder on the glass table with a crisp thwop. Marshall stared at her like she'd just spoken in code. Zara opened the folder. One by one, she laid out 3 documents like a magician laying down her final hand. An investment contract with the name Westbridge Capital Holdings. A notarized breakdown of 30% equity ownership in Airline Airways. A set of founders' rights, tied to a silent partner clause and triggered by breach of corporate ethics. Silence. Long, stunned, cold silence. Zara leaned back slightly, letting the moment simmer. You're looking at the largest individual stakeholder in this company, she said, voice like velvet laced with steel. Purchased through holding companies, foreign investors, and blind trusts over a 3-year span. Every acquisition was legal. Every signature authenticated. She glanced at Jonas. You can verify it. The paper trail is tight. Jonas had already picked up the documents. His eyes widened, scanning the fine print. Leon shifted uncomfortably. This isn't possible. It's not just possible, Zara replied. It's done. Marshall's face drained of color. Why didn't we know? Because I didn't want you to, she said, stepping back from the table. I didn't need a seat here until you made me take one. Someone laughed nervously. This is insane. You're saying you own us. I'm saying, Zara replied, slowly, that I've been protecting your stock price in silence for 3 years. And I'm not going to watch you gamble it away to protect a man who thinks slapping a black woman in first class is acceptable behavior. Eyes flicked toward Marshall, then toward Jonas. then back to the folder. No one knew what to say. The room was frozen. And Zara? She was just getting started. The silence in the boardroom was deafening. Marshall Kavanaugh, usually the most commanding voice in any room, now sat frozen at the head of the table, his mouth slightly open, his mind visibly racing for the right combination of words to regain control. But control had already left the room, and Zara Mendez stood in its place. She didn't sit. She didn't blink. She didn't wait for anyone to speak. Instead, she placed both hands flat on the polished glass table, leaned forward just enough to pierce their comfort zone, and said calmly, "I'm not here for an apology." Then, with chilling clarity, "I'm here for a vote." Marshall shifted uncomfortably. "A vote on what exactly?" Zara straightened up and walked slowly to the whiteboard at the far end of the room. She picked up a marker, wrote 2 columns, and labeled them. Option A and Option B. She turned to face the room. Option A, you fire Captain Rowan Nash publicly. You issue a statement acknowledging racial misconduct and abuse of power. You pay reparations, real money, not PR pennies, to black flyers and minority employees who've suffered quietly under your system. You restructure HR from the ground up with oversight. And you do it now. Some board members sat straighter. Others avoided eye contact. Option B, I liquidate my 30% equity stake today, and I sell it to Al Nasser Capital Group in Riyadh. Gasps. Visible panic. Leanne, the head of PR, nearly knocked over her coffee. Marshall stood up. You've spoken to Al Nasser? They've been waiting for 2 years, Zara said, folding her arms. They offered me $237 million and a seat on their board. All I had to do was walk away from this airline. But I didn't, because I believed Airline Airways could be better. The room erupted in half whispers and disjointed arguments. You can't do that. That would collapse our valuation. The Saudis have been trying to buy us for years. She's bluffing. She has to be bluffing. Jonas, the legal counsel, flipped through her documents again, his face drained. She's not bluffing, he muttered. Someone from the finance committee leaned forward, a thin smile on his lips. Ms. Mendez, maybe we can work something out. We could make a quiet donation to one of your foundations. Something discreet. You don't want this to hurt your reputation, either, do you? Zara arched an eyebrow. You're offering me hush money? No. I'm saying, this doesn't have to be hostile. She tilted her head. You think this is me being hostile? She laughed. It wasn't cold. It was devastating. Then came a question. The one that always comes when a woman in the room stops playing small. From the corner of the table, a senior board member, someone old enough to think respect came with gray hair, leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and sneered. What the hell does a girl like you need with this kind of money anyway? The room stilled. Every head turned. Zara didn't flinch. She walked slowly back to the table, stopping right across from him. And with the cool of 1,000 storms, she answered. You don't understand. It was never about the money. She let that hang in the air, then continued. It's about the message. I built this airline with my blood, my brilliance, my silence. I sat in the shadows and made you profitable. I watched you pat yourselves on the back while people like me were ignored, dismissed, slapped. On planes I helped fund. Another pause. You didn't notice me until I made you uncomfortable. Until I reminded you that power doesn't always knock. Sometimes it walks in, unannounced, wearing a jumpsuit and carrying a folder. No one said a word. She turned back to the whiteboard and tapped it with a marker cap. So, A or B? She capped the marker, walked back to her seat, but didn't sit. You have until midnight. And she walked out, doors swinging closed behind her, leaving 12 people, worth a collective $4.7 billion, looking at each other like scared interns on their first day of work. And for the first time in Airline's history, they realized they weren't running the show anymore. The boardroom was full. Again. Except this time, the temperature in the room wasn't tense. It was electric. Buzzing. Every executive sat upright. Alert. Eyes darting between one another like they were waiting for a thunderclap. The walls, once lined with sterile abstract art and gold plaques, now felt like they were closing in. At exactly 9:03 a.m., the heavy oak doors creaked open. Captain Rowan Nash walked in like a man summoned to accept another award. His swagger was intact. Chin high, uniform crisp, aviators clipped to his breast pocket. That same smug confidence, the kind that had carried him through 22 years of loyalty, lawsuits, and late-night cover-ups, walked in right alongside him. He glanced around the table, unbothered, then spotted Zara sitting silently at the far end, and smirked. "Oh, you again," he said with a snide chuckle, like she was just another angry customer he'd forgotten about. "You brought your boyfriend this time, or are you still running solo on your revenge tour?" A couple of the executives winced. Zara didn't blink. She didn't speak. She didn't even breathe heavily. Instead, she reached into her blazer pocket and slid out her phone with deliberate slowness. A simple motion, almost casual, but everyone in the room could feel it, the shift, the trap about to spring. With a tap, the audio began to play. At first, it was muffled, sounds of cabin chatter, clinking glasses. Then, "Don't assign her to first class again. That girl's accent is embarrassing. They think we're a budget airline when we let these foreigners pour champagne." Another voice, laughing nervously. "You're gonna get us canceled one day, Captain." "They wouldn't dare. They need me more than I need them." "What are they gonna do? Let some diversity higher fly, 737. Silence. Dead, suffocating silence. Then the file ended. No one spoke for a full 5 seconds. Marshall's face turned ghost white. Leanne, the PR director, looked like she might vomit into her handbag. Rowan's smirk cracked. "Where the hell did you get that?" Zara finally looked up. Her eyes were steel. She stood slowly. No theatrics. Just power in motion. "Does it matter?" She walked around the table, deliberate steps echoing across the marble floor. "That was you, wasn't it? Your voice. Your arrogance. Your belief that you were untouchable." Rowan tried to recover. "That's out of context. Someone edited that. Are you saying it's not your voice?" He hesitated, then didn't answer. Zara kept walking until she reached the head of the table, where Marshall usually presided. But he was slumped back, shrinking. She turned to Rowan, stared at him for a long moment, and then, in a tone that somehow landed soft and nuclear at the same time, said, "You want to know who I am?" He scoffed. "Who are you?" Zara placed both hands on the table, leaning forward just enough to look him directly in the eye. "I'm the reason you've had a job for the past 3 years. Every complaint that mysteriously disappeared, every incident that should have ended your career, I buried them. I protected this airline, which meant protecting you, because I thought saving the company was bigger than exposing a man like you." She straightened, now speaking to the entire room. "But I was wrong. I should have let you fall then." Then she looked toward Jonas, the legal counsel. "Terminate him." Jonas blinked. "Zara, it's a little more complicated." She cut him off. "Terminate him, or I terminate this company. I pull my stake. I go public. I call every black-owned publication and podcast. I leak that audio, and I make sure the world knows who they're flying with." Jonas stood, nodded. "We'll handle it." Rowan was still frozen, suddenly smaller in his uniform, like the jacket had grown 2 sizes too big. "You don't get to say goodbye," Zara said, her voice flat now. "You just leave." Security was already stepping in. No fight this time. Just the long, heavy silence of a man realizing he was no longer the center of gravity. As the doors closed behind him, Zara turned back to the board. Half of them looked relieved. The other half looked terrified. And for good reason. Zara was no longer asking for power. She was power. And now, they had to ask her what came next. He wasn't going down quietly. A week after his termination, Captain Rowan Nash resurfaced. Not in a courtroom, not in arbitration, but on a low-rent podcast hosted by a former disgraced newscaster known for conspiracy theories and Red Bull-fueled rants. The title of the episode? How I Was Canceled by a Diversity Agenda. The Captain Speaks. Rowan leaned into the mic, wearing a polo shirt 2 sizes too small and eyes that hadn't seen sleep in days. He looked less like a captain and more like a bitter man unraveling in real time. "They set me up," he growled. "That recording? Spliced. Edited. They took my words out of context. I was joking with a colleague. Locker room talk. And this woman, Zara, whatever. She's got a vendetta. He waved a USB stick on camera, his hand trembling slightly. I've got proof. Security footage. Audio of her making threats. She tried to tank the company if they didn't hand it over to her. No one's talking about that, are they? But the footage he released was shaky and clearly cut. No timestamps. No audio that directly supported his claims. One clip showed Zara walking down a hallway in silence. Another, a grainy boardroom shot without sound. Twitter chewed it up and spat it out in under 24 hours. The comments said it all. This the proof he had? Sir, you just filmed her existing. The desperation smells like Axe body spray and unpaid legal fees. You could have just shut up and been forgotten in peace. Zara? She said nothing. Not a tweet. Not a statement. Not even a vague Instagram story. Instead, she vanished from the spotlight and went to work behind the scenes like a ghost in couture. Within 2 weeks, Airline Airways quietly updated its leadership page. Suddenly, the new chief operating officer was a brilliant African-American woman with 25 years of aviation experience and a PhD in aerospace systems. The chief pilot? A black woman from the Bronx who started as a baggage handler and logged more flight hours than most of the fleet combined. The head of HR? A queer Latino labor rights lawyer who once led national protests against airline discrimination. No press release. No hashtags. Just a clean house. And for the first time, the top floor of Airline Airways looked like the people it flew. Zara also founded a new initiative called the Skyward Fund, a nonprofit that offered scholarships, flight training, and internships for underrepresented youth interested in aviation. Within a month, she had over 50 corporate sponsors, from aerospace giants to black-owned investment firms. At the fund's first press event, she finally broke her silence. This industry has made it clear who it prioritizes. We're here to shift that, not with hashtags or temporary apologies, but with jobs. Real seats in real cockpits. Real decision-making power. That's the only apology I care about. The applause lasted a full minute. Meanwhile, Rowan was unraveling. His LinkedIn page still listed him as Captain Aviation Strategist, motivational speaker, but no airline would take his calls. He sent applications to regional carriers, private jets, even cargo haulers. Nothing. One recruiter finally messaged him privately. We're not willing to take the PR risk. Desperate, he took to X, formerly Twitter, claiming he was being shadow banned, discriminated against, silenced. Then, a TikTok video went viral. A young woman in Las Vegas filmed her Uber ride. Y'all, my Uber driver just told me he used to fly planes for a living, and then went on a 15-minute rant about how woke culture destroyed his life. The comments lit up. Not Rowan driving Ubers and still being racist. When the cockpit closes, the back seat opens. Plot twist. Zara flew past him while he waited at a red light. He tried suing for defamation. The case was dismissed before it even reached court. And Zara? She didn't bother responding. Because power doesn't yell. It sits quiet, moves in silence, and lets the empire speak for itself. And now, Airline Airways was her empire, reimagined, rebuilt, and completely unrecognizable from the one that once ignored her name on a coffee cup. The soft chime of boarding echoed through the terminal as passengers began filing toward Gate 12. An Airline Airways 787 gleamed outside the window, polished, pristine, proud. Zara stood near the window, sunglasses low on her nose, her phone tucked into a leather clutch. Her energy was quiet now, not the kind that begged for attention, but the kind that commanded it without a word. As she stepped into the jet bridge, a flight attendant greeted her. Mid-30s, locks tied into a neat bun, voice calm and warm. Welcome aboard, Miss Hassan. No over-the-top enthusiasm. No forced smile. Just respect. Real respect. Zara gave a small nod and stepped into the aircraft. She paused in the doorway. At the cockpit, the pilot glanced back. A black woman, maybe early 40s. Confident, composed, clipped uniform tailored sharp. She caught Zara's eye and gave a brief, respectful nod. The kind soldiers give each other across battlefields they both survived. Zara smiled softly. Safe hands, she murmured. The woman responded with 2 simple words. Always, ma'am. As Zara walked down the aisle, the passengers stirred subtly. They didn't know who she was, not really, but they felt her presence. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She didn't need to. About halfway through the cabin, a young girl, maybe 10, sitting in coach next to her mother, nudged her. "Mommy, look." Her mother hushed her, but the girl whispered again, louder this time. "She looks like a queen." Zara didn't hear it, but if she had, she probably would have smiled the way royalty does when children see them before the crown. She continued toward first class, where the world was quieter, roomier, but for the first time, didn't feel detached. Because everything about this flight was different now. She took her seat, 1A. Her name was already printed discreetly on the leather headrest. No one batted an eye. No one questioned it. She belonged. The cabin door closed, and a familiar voice chimed through the intercom. It was smooth now, composed, the kind of tone you trust with your life at 35,000 feet. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard Airline Airways Flight 203 to Washington, D.C. This is your captain speaking." Zara listened for a beat, then closed her eyes, just for a second. A breath. A moment. And then she opened them and saw her. The same flight attendant from that flight. The one who hadn't said anything when Captain Rowan backhanded her coffee. The one who had smiled nervously while watching it happen. The one who, back then, wasn't sure what to do. Now, she stood straighter. Her uniform was crisp, and the badge on her chest had changed. It had wings now. A promotion. She approached cautiously, tray in hand, and placed a drink on Zara's table. Her fingers were steady this time. "Sparkling water with lime," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "Chilled as requested." Zara glanced up, studied her face. The woman looked back with a flicker of nerves, but also something else. Growth. She was no longer the same girl who froze. Zara lifted the glass with one hand, her red nails catching the light. "Thank you," she said, eyes holding steady. "You got it right this time." The attendant's breath caught slightly. Not from fear, but relief. Zara took a sip, leaned back in her seat. Outside the window, the plane pushed back from the gate, slowly turning toward the runway. She didn't say anything else. She didn't need to. The message was clear. She was always watching. But more importantly, she had already changed the view from every window on that aircraft. And now, the sky finally belonged to everyone.